Hey guys, it's Yuno again, and I got a tutorial here on some basic mixing techniques again. And this one is going to be on equalization, also known as EQ. And EQ is basically for the beginner a gain control or a volume control for certain frequencies, so you can cut or boost certain frequencies while leaving the other frequencies of a certain sound the same. And let me demonstrate really quick. I got Nexus open, I got a Nexus patch, and check it out. And you can see what I did there. I boosted when I went up here, boosted certain frequencies, and I cut certain frequencies down here. Alright. And your job as a mixer is to basically, for the beginner at least, to get a song to sound well with itself. You want all the sounds to not necessarily build up in a certain frequency range. You want it all to kind of work well together. You don't want it all to pile up at, a certain hertz. You don't want 5,000, you don't want a huge amount of activity at one frequency or another. You don't want 1,000 instruments at one frequency. Just it sounds harsh if that happens. So basically EQing allows you to kind of control, and it's really one of the best tools for mixing. It takes a little bit of time to kind of get used to, but when you do, it sounds really good. It sounds really clean when you're done. Anyways, so I'm going to show you first what I did with the vocals here, and I'm going to show you. I use a lot of subtractive EQing. I remove a lot of the bad sound or the less important sound, and I keep all the good sound or the more important sound. And on the vocal here, for some reason, I guess this microphone captured quite a bit of sub bass. So check it out, this little region over here. You'll see it light up, and it shows you that there's a lot of low sub bass.
I am weak and move it.
Okay, so what I did is I got a filter, a really nice quality filter called Engineer's Filter, and I'm filtering everything out at 110 hertz, everything below 100 hertz, everything below 100 hertz I am actually filtering out, and everything above is being passed. It's just being let through. So I'll show you here again on the equalizer.
I am weak
And that time you can see that there's nothing really going on down here, and that's because I filtered it out like I showed you here. Alright, and you might think, well, I didn't really hear a difference there. Well, all these little sub frequencies that kind of build up in hi-hats and vocals, when you put it all together at the end of the song, altogether it kind of adds up and kind of adds a little bit of mush that you really don't want. So like I said, it just helps to take away all the bad frequencies, or the less important ones. Right here I thought that the highs were a little bit more important than the lows, especially with all the instruments that are used in the song. So I basically took one, which is a low shelf, and I kind of dragged it up and down a little bit, and I'm gonna let the high frequencies go unaltered, and I'm just basically taking a little bit off of the lows, just to kind of accentuate the highs, like I said. And that's also known as subtractive EQ, like I was saying. Okay, and here is a kick I'll show you. Right back here, I think it was. And then here's what I use. Pretty much additive, yeah, I use additive EQ on this one, and that's subtractive is where you're subtracting frequencies, you're cutting, and additive is where you're adding. Alright, and I didn't mention this before, but this is Blake Reary's Nowhere Near. It's a FL Studio demo, so pretty cool track. And I noticed on this song there aren't a lot of sub bass instruments. There's no synths or anything that are really super bassy. There might be like a one shot here or there. But to kind of give this a solid bass feel, I just boosted the kick just a tad in the sub frequency right here, right? And I also noticed with this sample that I'm using, I also boosted the low mids, or this kind of region right here, because it's got a little bit of a thump to it. Wanted to keep that nice little transient thump, right? So let's have a listen. Here's it off and on, off, on. Right, so it's very subtle, but like I said, all those little things add up in the end. Here's a snare. I'll take off the EQ first, and I'll put it back on. And you know, you can hear that's very, very subtle. It's just a very slight boost in the mid-range. And that's just because I thought those frequencies are just a little bit more important. And like I said before, I also try to use as much subtractive EQing as possible. On the snare and the kick, you saw I used additive. I usually, though, try to stay to subtractive just because it's a lot easier, I think, to clean out bad frequencies than it is to try to, you know, keep adding to certain frequencies. It just kind of becomes a mess when you're trying to add more and more on different things. It's just a lot easier when you do subtractive. And it just takes a little bit of practice to get really good at it. But when you finally do, and you're taking away all the frequencies you don't need, you're making sure that, you know, one sound isn't invading another's space. I'm going to demonstrate here. I'm going to show you the kick and the snare. So the snare, there's a lot of activity up in the highs and the mids. And the kick, there's a lot of activity down low, right? It's pretty obvious that, you know, the kick is mostly lower and the snare is mostly higher. And, you know, just the way that they are, they're pretty already mixed well, I should say. The snare, since it's occupying most of the highs, not very much of the lows, it's not really intruding the lows of the kick. And the kick is not invading much of the highs of the snare or the mids. So that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to sort of keep the different sounds from invading other sounds' frequency area. I guess that's the best way to put it at this point. So yeah, that's basically it. There's also a difference between different types of EQs. This one's a parametric EQ, where you decide where you exactly want to boost or cut, and you decide how steep you want it to be or how large you want it to be. There's also ones with like knobs and whatnot. Linear phase, that means it messes with the phase so that it sounds really transparent. It's very digital sounding. There's the minimum phase, where it's more analog characteristic. The phase is more behind the sound you're boosting or cutting. And they just have different sounds. You just kind of gotta practice with it. But anyways, if there's anything you gotta take away from this, it's that when you're mixing, you want everything to sound good. You want a gain stage first. Afterwards, you want to use EQ to cut out all the bad frequencies of each of the sounds. And then after that, you can sort of tinker with everything and make all the important sounds really stand out. So I'm probably going to hopefully go over that next lesson. And if you could also check out my personal channel, I have the link in the description, and I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. And yeah, subscribe, I'd really appreciate it.